The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So, once again, before November, it is over for the local tackle professional football team. Yeah, it's disappointing. Maybe a little more unexpected this year than some years. But after what we saw yesterday in New York or New Jersey, come on. There's only one thing encouraging, and that's that the one who picks the new coach, new general manager, new front office across the board won't be Dan Snyder. That's it. Because, as we say on Passover every year, Manishtanana Halayla Hazeh, why is this night different than all other nights? Why is this season different than all other seasons? It's different because Dan Snyder's no longer here. That's the only really good thing you can say. Yesterday's game resembled many of the games of the Snyder era. It has resembled many of the games that Ron Rivera has coached in his 3 years plus. But the reality is this is what they are as an organization right now, and the future, we'll see what the future holds. But this is residue from ownership that didn't change until July. And the new ownership under Josh Harris with Magic Johnson and Mark Ein and others, Mitchell Rales in his partnership, they have done a great job of making people feel pretty good about the organization again. And they were able to stave off the ugliness for a while by winning preseason games and winning the first 2 games of the season. But the reality is this is who they are. They're a team that was talking big heading into this 3-game stretch. Ooh, Bears at home, Atlanta on the road, Giants on the road. They all stink. They ought to win all 3 of those games. And then here comes Philadelphia, and let's see. Well, they were god-awful against the Bears. They managed to beat a bad Atlanta team on the road, although Ron Rivera called it an ugly win. And yesterday, with the first half that was as ugly as any game I've seen in recent years, they lost again, and they lost ugly. And they lost to a team that seemingly was a mess going into the game. It was the Giants that had all the offensive line problems. It was the Giants who had to start a backup quarterback. It was the Giants who were teetering on disaster. And Washington came in and just, I mean, it was terrible. It's hard to believe, and they've done this week after week with Sam Howell, who it's inconceivable, has 40 sacks. Yeah, the offensive line stinks, but a professional quarterback knows how to get rid of the ball, and Sam Howell still hasn't learned that. Now, maybe to his credit, he's not turning it over, but, you know, Washington was gifted 3 turnovers or 2 turnovers, and they didn't do anything with it, and the third one should have been a turnover, should have been a pick 6 by Kevon Thibodeau, who dropped the ball, and they couldn't capitalize. They found a way to score only 7 points in an NFL game, and Magic Johnson, who's kind of new to this game, he mastered basketball and has been very successful as a part owner of the Dodgers, tweeted out, "It's hard to win in the NFL when you score only 7 points." You think? You think, Magic? How about when you go 1 for 15 on third down? That's hard to do. 1 for 15 on third downs. You're facing a team that had 5 sacks all season, and they get 5 sacks against you in the first half and 6 for the game. I mean, these things just don't happen to teams that aren't very good. These things happen to dysfunctional teams. And we've kind of stopped using that with Dan Snyder gone, and we've kind of stopped using the term organizational loss. But in many ways, it is an organizational loss yesterday. The head of the organization, thank God, is no longer here. But the man he hired to run a coach-centric operation has proven over the course of 3 years plus that he's a good man. He stands up in the face of adversity and answers all the questions. You know, hasn't really been snippy or blown up at anybody. And with, you know, unimaginable mess that he inherited with all that went on with Dan Snyder and the name change and, you know, the lawsuits and everything that was going on and all the distractions. He's done a pretty good job, but it was a job that nobody could do. There's nobody who could have stepped into this situation over the last 4 years and have done any better, I don't think, than Ron Rivera. It's an impossible situation, which is why there's got to be a complete fumigation of the organization from top to bottom at the end of the year. Jason Wright, gone. Ron Rivera, gone. His coaching staff, gone. The Martin and Marty show, gone. The only real question is what happens with Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy, you've heard his name thrown around. Oh, why not just get rid of Rivera and throw him in as the head coach? Well, you saw him yesterday as an offensive coordinator in the 7th game of his career, completely overmatched by a veteran defensive coordinator in Wink Martindale, who is, throwing together a team that's not very good. I mean, they're not a very good defense. They're an even worse offense. And he managed to make a mockery of what Bieniemy was trying to do in the first half. So where they go from here? Well, they go through the rest of the season. It's a dead season walking once again. They have 10 games to go. Ron Rivera said anything can happen. I guess that could also mean he could lose his job. And while I don't think that's going to happen, based on what we've been able to observe about Josh Harris, the way he's run his other teams, and also realizing that he's replacing an owner who is known as impetuous, though, Snyder only fired coaches twice during the season. The first one as a young owner, totally ridiculous, getting rid of Norv Turner at 7-6 with the team still in position to make the playoffs. And then when he finally had to get rid of Jay Gruden 5 games into the season in 2019. Other than that, and the other years that he owned the team, he would wait till the end. I mean, even Jim Zorn, who was a complete empty suit in his last year, the second of the 2 years he coached, he kept him on till the end of the year. So, but I don't think that we want to see Josh Harris wants to be seen in that same light. And, based on how he's run the Devils and the 76ers, that's really not the way he rolls. But sometimes when you get into a season like this and you've had losses like the Bears debacle, like scoring only 3 points, they should have been shut out by Buffalo, like what happened yesterday in New York, that you're forced to make a change because the team is falling apart in front of you and there's real discord in the locker room. So far, the players have been pretty careful about what they say, but Jonathan Allen erupted yesterday. Now, I can't play what he said and still keep my job, but suffice to say, there were plenty of F-bombs and S-bombs along the way. Started out okay, started answering a couple of questions from J.P. Finley of NBC4 in a pretty civil way.
What's the evaluation like after a loss like that?
They whooped our ass, plain and simple. Got to be better.
Anything they did that surprised you guys early on?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think it's just a lack of focus on our part, a lack of attention to detail, not starting fast, and creating holes that are too big for us to overcome in the second half.
Does it get frustrating?
Frustrating. And that's where it came. Quote, "It's been 7 effing years of the same S. I'm tired of this S." And then he went on a longer rant about that. He says, I'm effing tired of this BS. It's been 7 effing years of the same S. And then they said, what can you do to improve? And he said, get ready for effing Philadelphia. So that's the first indication that things are at the boiling point. At least it seems to me. Now, this is part of he's one of the cornerstones of a defense that actually played pretty well yesterday. I mean, you give up 14 points in a game, you should win. Magic's math is good. You score 7, you're not going to win many games. So that may be something to keep an eye on. I don't know how far can they go, but I'll tell you this. It is not going to be Eric Bieniemy who becomes the head coach if they fire Ron Rivera during the season. That's not happening. Jack Del Rio would take over. Del Rio's been a head coach before in Jacksonville and in Oakland, and he would get the job, and he would bring this ship to port before they can unload all the passengers. And so that's what would happen. The Bieniemy thing is going to be interesting, and I think it's going to be tied very much to what happens with Sam Howell. How does that play out? Where does Howell, over the last 10 games, show enough promise that for the new coaching staff, and I think this will be key in the interviews that they do in looking for a new head coach, how does he fit in? Because if he works out, it's great because he's a really cheap alternative. They got him 2 years under control under his rookie contract for like less than $1 million a year, and that gives him plenty of money to spend elsewhere. But if that's a dry hole and Bieniemy doesn't coach him up, I can't imagine that either one is back. Bieniemy's got 2 years on his deal. He's got a contract for next year, which is unusual for an assistant coach. So they may actually bring him back with a new head coach. That's not out of the realm of possibility. And then, pie in the sky, you see great development out of Howell over the last 10 games. He and Bieniemy are arm in arm, and they're developing well together. And maybe give Bieniemy the head coaching job. But right now, he seems miles and miles away from that. And starting to get some hints of how unprepared he was for this game, Bieniemy, and how unprepared he was to make adjustments in this game. This was Rivera after the game, where he talked about what they did, and he was complimentary of what they did in the second half, but it got to the point, we'll get to this in a minute, where he had 26 seconds left in the first half with a timeout in his pocket, and you can score on any play in the NFL, and he chose to throw that away, not even take a chance at the end of the first half, because that's how things were going in the first half. I guess he didn't want sack number 6 to happen to Howell in the first half. And this is again, I think, a clue as to how he's feeling about Eric Bieniemy now, and he's been saying this throughout the season, that Bieniemy has total call on how they run the offense, whether they throw all the time, which they have been, whether they run, however it's done, it's up to him. And this was, I don't want to say he's throwing Bieniemy under the bus, but judge for yourself from what Rivera says here.
They threw a lot of different things at us. And again, we got to be able to pick them up and, slow it down. I mean, that's the truth about it. The first half, whatever they did, they were having a little more success than we needed them to have. We got to be able to be better at early on and make those adjustments a little bit quicker. We came out at halftime, and I thought these adjustments that were made were what we needed to have.
Make the adjustments quicker. Yeah, he's watching Sam Howell basically go down on every series, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and it's not till halftime that they do anything. And Rivera, again, I guess, was so afraid that there'd be an even bigger disaster with time on the clock and possession of the ball in the first half, he didn't even want it. Here's his answer why he threw those 26 seconds away.
At that point, it was enough was enough. We were going to go in. We were going to talk about the things that we needed to get done. The drive beforehand was not a very good situation, and I just felt it would be better for us to get in, talk about those things. We were going to get the ball to begin with in the second half.
Enough is enough. No, you have time on the clock. You have time to score. And we saw this during the Dwayne Haskins era. In the first 4 games that he coached, remember, those were, I don't want to say they were necessarily high percentage winnable games, but they were 2-possession games late in the going. This is year 1. And he chose not to use timeouts to try and preserve the clock. He just ran out the game, and he talked about, we're beat up. We got too many guys who are hurt. No, he didn't want to put the ball in the hands of Dwayne Haskins at that point. And, you wonder, by doing what he did and throwing away time in the first half, is he saying, oh, my God, Bieniemy is screwing things up so bad, I'm not going to even give him a chance here to screw it up again with time left in the first half. We'll just throw that time away and see if we can adjust at halftime, which they did. Now, this is how, on the adjustments that they were able to make at halftime and how they did look a lot better in the second half. And really on that last drive that they had, you wonder why they were doing that there and couldn't do it in the first half. Here's how.
The second half, we got to some more kind of max protection type stuff and kind of just, kind of put it in the hands of our receivers. And those guys did a good job of, getting down the field vertically and beating those guys and winning their one-on-one matchups. I was just trying to do my best to get the ball in their hands. So they definitely all stepped up and made some big plays. That last play, I got to make it easier on Jahan. Probably a lot of people are going to say he should have caught it, but I got to give him a better ball, and he was wide open. I got to give him a better throw.
Yeah, now that would not have been a touchdown if Dotson had caught it, but it would have been a first down with time on the clock. No guarantee that they score there, but it was a 4th down play which could have kept the drive alive and essentially ended the game. Here's Dotson, who was seen after the game just sitting on the sideline for like 10 minutes, just contemplating what had happened. And this is a guy who was supposed to have a breakout year this year, and it's been mostly a disappointment.
I know the capability of myself. I know I make those plays all the time with my eyes closed. So not being able to make that play, it hurts for sure. And I'm going to let it hurt because that's the only way I'm going to get better because I don't want to feel like this again. But, I'm going to get back to work. That's all I do. That's what I'm going to continue to do.
Okay. His attitude is good. That's good. He's like Terry McLaurin. He's not going to be a diva wide receiver or anything like that. But for a guy who was a touchdown maker last year, he's got 1 on the year. He had 7, I think, in 12 games last year. Now, this is more on the lack of adjustment. And it would seem that a veteran offensive coordinator would look at what was happening in the first quarter. I don't even think they ran the ball in the first quarter. The drop-back passing game with Howell wasn't working. Go to something else sooner. This is Hal on why they weren't able to make any adjustments at halftime, until halftime. See if you buy this.
The hard thing is, you work all week long on a game plan, and you work on the opening script, and you work on all these plays that you think are good against their defense. And, at the end of the day, the play calls were fine, and what we were doing was fine. We just weren't executing. So it's kind of hard to just say, after the first few drives, to just say, just screw it, we're throwing our whole game plan away, we're going to do something else. I thought our plan was fine. We just got to do a better job executing.
Why couldn't you say, screw it, let's throw it away? And the calls were not fine because the Giants were rolling over you. And your offensive line is a joke. I mean, it's just awful. This guy, Andrew Wiley, who they brought with him from Kansas City, he stinks. He can't play. Looked bad in the preseason. Looks bad in the regular season. In fact, he had a quote. Where did I see? So one of the quotes he said was like, we knew it was coming, but we just couldn't stop it. What are you doing out there on the field? So I have a hard time buying that the plays are scripted and we just can't throw out the game plan. Why not? It's not working. How about just saying, we got this running back here who's really good, Brian Robinson. We're just going to start feeding him the ball. At least we're going to keep it out of the hands of the Giants, see if we can run against the team that, by the way, had been giving up like 5.1 yards a carry. Why not try that? Are you that scripted that you got to stick to all the plays that you've carefully written out during the week? They ain't working. Dump them. Move on to something else. Didn't do it. And, God, it's just mind-boggling that a team could play this poorly. It's not mind-boggling that they're 3-4. I think that's would have been a realistic expectation after 7 games. You'd hope for better. This is the softer part of the schedule. They have, now have to play Philadelphia next week with underdogs at home. They got 2 games against Dallas. They got New England on the road, and the Patriots finally won yesterday, got number 300 for Bill Belichick. So maybe they're back on track. You got to play against the Rams, who are still pretty good team. They lost yesterday to Pittsburgh, but they're pretty decent. I mean, the rest of the schedule, I don't know if there's a game that you'd look at and say, oh, yeah, they should definitely win that. I think they'll win 2 or 3 more, but there's nothing on that schedule that suggests that they would be a favorite in any of those games, even the home games. I just don't see it. They're, again, 6.5-point underdogs at home, which means they're close to 10-point underdogs on a neutral field against Philadelphia, which moved to 6-1 last night, and somebody found a way, at least in their adjustments, to handle what Miami was doing, holding them to 14 points or 17 points. Pretty impressive in what they're able to do. This is Terry McLaurin, who I think has always been the stand-up guy on this team since he's been here, coming here in 2019, and has never wavered from the way he talks about the team with the media, and always accepts the blame, even though when it's not necessarily his fault. You're finally hearing some real frustration from him as well. I played you the beginning of what Jonathan Allen said before he started throwing around F-bombs like candies. But this was McLaurin, and I sensed some real frustration from him as he talked about yesterday's loss. And he had a good game. He had 6 catches yesterday.
You can't let a team blitz your face off. And, we didn't really have a lot of answers for that. We prepared, but we didn't execute like our preparation, like we tried to prepare for this week. So you got to give them credit for their aggressiveness. Second half, I felt like we came out a lot better. When you get those opportunities, when teams are blitzing like that, at least one-on-one opportunities, I felt like we got to that late. Hopefully going forward, we can just get to it a little earlier and give us a chance to make plays down the field. But at the end of the day, We still have opportunities, receiver-wise. We just got to continue to be better, separating against man, making contested catches, and helping Sam out, whether that's signals or just the little things throughout the game or throughout a certain look that could really give him comfortability that he can really drive the ball. So, that one sucked for sure.
Yeah, that sucked for sure. And when you hear Terry McLaurin say that, that tells you a lot if you've observed him throughout his career here. I've been here so many times, I ought to just, throw on the tape of last season or the season before that. And hopefully, if I'm sitting here, if I'm lucky enough to be sitting here next year at this time, I'll be talking about a team heading into November with a lot of hope. But another season has been pretty much flushed at this point, and with 10 games to go, while Ron Rivera says anything can happen, I don't know if anything positive could conceivably happen over these last 10. But, as they say, that's why they play the game. All right, coming up in the next hour, much more on the Commanders' debacle yesterday in New York, the incredible Mike McDaniel story of the Charlotte Hornets hat, and much more. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Before I bring my blood pressure up again, discussing what happened yesterday in New Jersey, New York, whatever you prefer. Another season flushed down the toilet. It's not over. Anything can happen, says Ron Rivera over the last 10 games, but most of it probably won't be good. They may pick up a few wins along the way. It may be a 5 or 6 win season, who knows. But they're 3-4, and we always hope for meaningful football in December. Barring something crazy, doesn't look like that's going to happen. They have to play Philadelphia at home next week. They go on the road to play the Patriots, who got their act together yesterday and beat Buffalo, giving Bill Belichick his 300th win. I'll have some more thoughts on that in just a moment. You got to play the Cowboys twice over the last part of the season. They've got San Francisco. They've got Seattle. They've got Miami. Yes, Miami lost last night, but They just are not a good football team, and they're a mess offensively. I mean, we can talk all we want about the creative play calling of Eric Bieniemy and how Sam Howell has outrun his draft position, but the fact of the matter is he's a sack machine. The offensive line stinks. I know that, but 40 sacks in 7 games. It's more than just offensive line. And we'll get into that. A couple things, though, before I get crazy about the Commanders again. One, we're going to see Max Scherzer pitching tonight. This is the later of the 2 games. It's Game 7, Rangers and Astros. And the ironic thing about the Astros is they're a great road team, and they stink at home. And you would think, with a roster put together with that much care and as much tanking as they did to put it together, that they would find a way to reconfigure the ballpark, Minute Maid Park, I guess is what it's called, Minute Maid Park, to get it more conducive to the skills of the players. The Orioles moved the left field wall out at Camden Yards, and I'm not saying that's the reason they became a 100-win team this year, but it's helped them, obviously. So whatever the Astros are doing to build the roster, they ought to have a park around that roster that's going to help them win rather than not score runs. Now, I heard a conversation this morning on ESPN about tonight's game and about Max Scherzer, who's taking the mound as he did in Game 7 of the World Series 4 years ago with that neck injury and gutted it out and got some help from really big hits in that game, and the Nats won the World Series. So now he's back in this position, but the last time he was out, he allowed 5 runs in 4 innings in Game 3. Well, Game 3 was in Arlington, Texas. This one is in Houston, Texas. So he's done it there before. Can he do it again tonight? I don't know. But it was Scherzer who was not able to go in Game 6 here, but with a travel day, got back to Houston, got back on the mound, and pitched well enough to win. And if he does it again, the legend of Max Scherzer grows. Now, he's not been a very good postseason pitcher. He's below 500. He's had some really bad outings, as he did in Game 3. But he was such a great competitor and so great to watch in the years that he pitched here. Whether you root for the Rangers or not, I think you root for Max Scherzer. Somehow you do. At least I do. So that's tonight. I think the Phillies are probably going to close out their series. They're at home tonight. And we got a World Series, which will start on Saturday. And I realize it's starting that late, but you have a lot of days off. The baseball needs to jump on this. This is ridiculous because the championship series could both end tonight. The Phillies could win, and whoever wins between the Astros and the Rangers goes to the World Series, and they don't get started until Saturday. That's just not the rhythm of baseball. They ought to be starting on Thursday. If you start Thursday, and even in the case of the Phillies, if they have to go to tomorrow night, at least you'll have just one day off and plenty of time to get to. I'm not sure how that lines up. I have to look at it, but who has home field advantage? But it will start Saturday, and that's when the baseball most important part of the season begins. And we're tickling November here, right? Isn't that right? Because we got. I guess it'll be like the 28th. 28th is when it starts on Saturday. All right, Bill Belichick, and again, the Commanders will be playing there in 2 weeks. It doesn't look like he's going to be fired before then because they pulled off their biggest win of the season yesterday, beating the Bills in Foxborough and coming from behind to do it. But it trickled out yesterday morning from Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network that Belichick had agreed to a lucrative multi-year contract extension in the off-season. Well, you could jump to the conclusion like, oh, yeah, Robert Kraft's not getting rid of him, no matter how bad it gets. He's not dumping Bill Belichick. We never really thought seriously that he would do it during the season, but after they had a couple of just completely embarrassing losses, it wasn't out of the conversation. Now they're back on track a little bit after beating Buffalo, so the dogs have been called off. But they're still a 2-5 team. And he is still now, 18 wins away from passing Don Shula. So he's obviously not going to do it this year and may not be able to do it next year. So the lucrative multi-year contract extension would take care of it, even if he needs to go another 2 seasons after this to catch Shula, to get past Shula. But I also look at it this way. I think it's still possible he could get fired, and the multi-year extension is just money. That's whatever happens here. Bob Kraft owes Bill Belichick $1 gazillion for this 6 Super Bowl championships. And that has raised the value of the franchise beyond belief, not to mention marketing and everything else that they've been able to reap the benefits of. It's Bill Belichick winning all that. So if he has to pay off, 3 or 4 years of a contract that pays him well over $10 million a year, so what? That's chump change. These franchises that we see here, they sell for $6 billion now. Patriots would probably sell for more than that. So I don't think that's a big deal. But it does, and according to people who covered the Patriots, this kind of stuff usually gets out there when there's real pressure. Like when they had the Deflategate stuff some years ago, and before that, Spygate, you would hear about the security that Bill Belichick would have. So I think this was probably leaked to Ian Rappaport sometime yesterday or sometime last week to be put out. This is when news usually gets out there on Sunday because they like to break it on the pregame shows. But as far as Bill Belichick getting fired before the end of the year, that ship now sails, I think, with the win over Buffalo yesterday. And as far as at the end of the season, I don't think this has any factor at all. This is just the money that he's going to collect as if he really needs it. Whatever happens before the end of the season. All right, if you're looking around at the various websites, the SI.com, if you're looking at the ESPN.com, CBS Sports, any of these sites, this is way up on the list of stories. It's the Jonathan Allen outburst that he had to, and he wasn't even yelling at J.P. Finley, who covers the Commanders for NBC4. He was just blowing out frustration of being here for 7 years after winning national championships at Alabama, being part of it. I don't think he lost 4 games in 3 years when he was playing there, and he's already lost 4 games this year, and it's another season, and stacking them up. He's been to one playoff appearance, and that was a kind of an excuse me one when they backed in at 7-9 in Ron Rivera's first year. And so this starts out okay. This is how the conversation begins, and then it gets really naughty. Here's Allen with J.P. Finley.
What's the evaluation like after a loss like that?
They whooped our ass, plain and simple. Got to be better.
Anything they did that surprised you guys early on?
No, I want to say so. I think it's just a lack of focus on our part, a lack of attention to detail, not starting fast, and creating holes that are too big for us to overcome in the second half.
Does it get frustrating?
Ooh, the F word touched him off, and the F word led to a lot of other F words. F, yes, it does. I'm effing tired of this. I'm effing tired of this bull S. It's been 7 effing years of the same S. And then he was asked about improving it, and he said, yeah, get our minds right and play effing Philadelphia. So a lot of effings there from Jonathan Allen. And you can jump to a conclusion, and I like to do that because that's kind of what we do here in sports radio. We jump to conclusions. But if you're thinking about the future of Ron Rivera, and I would be shocked if he doesn't last the season no matter how bad it gets, but when you have one of your team leaders expressing that kind of frustration, it may be a sign of what's going on inside the locker room, that players have just had it. And just to get that mess out of there and just be able to complete the season as best they can, it's not out of the question if they have a really bad outing against Philadelphia, if it's like a 38-3 game and then they lose at New England. And that, by the way, that was the end of Jay Gruden getting blown out by New England. That he does make a change, but it won't be Eric Bieniemy. It'll be Jack Del Rio if they make a change during the season. This is Rivera trying to put as much lipstick on this pig as he can, but what can you do after a game like that yesterday?
To me, it's really about how you bounce back more than it is anything else. With 10 games left to go, you never know what's going to happen. But you got to take them one at a time. You got to stay focused on it. We'll correct these things. There's a lot of things that we can correct. A lot of things we're going to get better at, and we'll continue to get, work at it, and we'll see what happens.
We keep hearing that. These are things we can correct. We can get better at it. But the sack thing doesn't get better. It doesn't. They played another team which can't sack the quarterback. They come into Game 7 of the season to face a Giants team that had 5 sacks all year, and they had 5 sacks in the first half yesterday, 6 for the game, bringing the grand total for Sam Howell to 40, as he is well on his way to being the most sacked quarterback of all time. On top of that, as we've seen, when teams know that they're going to throw, that they just, as I say, pin their ears back and come, which makes a comeback even more difficult. So you fall behind 14-0 to this team, which is in your backfield all day because you're dropping Sam Howell back to throw all the time. Well, no wonder Terry McLaurin says this.
It's hard to play against yourself and the opponent, so you got to give them credit. They came out extremely aggressive. We knew that, but we didn't execute well enough in the first half to exploit that kind of defense that they were throwing at us. And second half we were a lot better, but it's hard to play catch up.
More from McLaurin, and I don't know where the ups are, because even when they won last week at Atlanta, Ron Rivera talked about winning ugly. So. Of the games that they've played this year, is there one that you could say that they really played great? Maybe competing with Philadelphia. And again, no moral victories there. But taking Philadelphia to overtime, okay, maybe. But I wouldn't call this really an up and down season. I'd call this a mostly down season with a few ups. McLaurin maybe phrases it a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's hard to get a consistent flow going when you're back and forth. You take 2 steps forward, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. You don't handle things the right way in the game, and then you look up and you just teeter-totter. And as the season goes on, we're approaching about the halfway point, so we have to be able to turn the corner and not making the same mistakes, staying ahead of the sticks, not hurting ourselves with penalties, finishing drives with touchdowns, starting faster, finishing better. So the teams who are going to make those playoff push as the season go along are the teams that figure that stuff out.
Playoff push seems ridiculous. I mentioned something about that on Twitter yesterday. I said if they're still thinking playoffs, you might start Jacoby Brissett in the second half, and people wigged out on the word playoffs. But realistically, in a 17-game schedule, if you go in 3-3 to your 7th game, you should still be thinking about the playoffs. And that brings up the question: how much is this? Well, now I think it's all about this, but how much of the season has been about finding out about Sam Howell, and how much of it is actually trying to win to get into the tournament, as they say, and who knows what happens from there. But it doesn't look like that. The other really thing about this that makes this loss more despicable than maybe some of the others is that they knew what the Giants were going to do, and they weren't ready for it. And then when the Giants did what they did, they weren't able to adjust, or waited until halftime to do that. And Michael Phillips, now with the Washington Times, used to write for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. He covered this game for the Times, and he pointed out that Wink Martindale, who loves to blitz, brought pressure on 57% of the snaps yesterday. 57%. So it's not like Sam Howell gets out on the field, expects to see one kind of defense, and sees a completely different one. He saw what they expected and still was god-awful, especially in the first half when he was sacked 5 times.
Yeah, not much different. I think for the most part, we had them picked up. It was just a matter we just got to do a better job winning our one-on-one battles. I got to do a better job getting the ball out of my hands. But, yeah, I mean, it's tough. They have good guys up front, and the way their front is structured, they demanded a lot of one-on-one, reps with our guys. And it makes it tough, especially in passing situations when those guys know they can just tee off. But at the end of the day, we just got to do a better job kind of avoiding those situations. And then when we are in those situations, we just got to execute.
Yeah, well, that was the whole execution thing. They kept talking about that, bringing up that famous line from who was the USC coach, and he was coaching Tampa Bay when they were 0-16 in their first year, 0-14, I guess, in their first year. And somebody said, "What about your execution, coach?" And he said, "I think that's a good idea." This is Rivera. Sometimes you can tell some things from what Rivera says and how he says them. He's not very good in these kind of media things. He often puts his foot in his mouth, even admits it. But this is the question of, okay, you did some good things in the second half there, and especially that last drive where you're getting the ball out quickly and, you were able to move down the field. You couldn't complete the drive as you had a wide-open Jahan Dotson, and Howell couldn't get him the ball, and that ended it for them for the day. But this is about second-half adjustments and why they didn't go to them earlier. See if you can glean anything from this from Ron Rivera yesterday.
It's the same game plan that we used in the second half that was effective. Unfortunately, we didn't get it done early on. We put ourselves in a tough spot.
Why not?
Because we didn't handle it.
So he's saying they didn't change the game plan. I don't believe that. I just don't believe that. The game plan that they had in the second half seemed to be different, and he kept talking about adjustments that they made in the second half. He's saying adjustments in execution. That's hard to get your head around. This is more on that. This is Jahan Dotson again, and you got to listen to how he says it. That's why I play all this audio, because it's not just what they say, but it's how they say it. So the question is, when you got out on the field and you faced that Giants defense, was there anything that was unexpected?
No. We knew where they were going to bring the house. We knew they were going to play zero. I've been saying it all week. We knew they were going to test us man-to-man. It was about getting our playmakers the ball on the outside, and that's what we did in the second half. That's why we had some success.
So if you know what they're going to do, don't you have a game plan in place to handle that? I guess they thought that their offensive linemen could actually block, which they really haven't shown all year they can do. So, okay, maybe they made that assumption. But the game plan that they had on offense, I mean, you talk about getting out coached. Eric Bieniemy was taken to school by Wink Martindale. And again, what did you hear all week? Oh, Martindale loves to blitz. Oh, they blitzed. Why weren't you ready for that? Well, we just didn't execute. We were ready, but we just didn't execute. I don't know. Defense, not too bad. I'll tell you this. Chase Young, he's getting sacks. There was one play where he got a sack. He wasn't even blocked. And a defense that was, pretty good. Not tremendous, but they gave up big plays is what they do. I think the number was, John Keim had this, over the course of the season, the first 6 games, the Giants had 14 plays of 20 yards plus. Yesterday they had 7. So they had basically half of what they had in the first 6 games of the season yesterday. So that's a big thing with them, is that they give up explosive plays. They didn't do a bad job on third down defensively yesterday. They were shockingly bad themselves on third down, 1 for 15. But as far as what they did defensively, what's the number? I know it was under 500. Yeah, they were 5 of 16 on third downs, and Washington did convert 2 of 3 on fourth. But to go 1 for 15 on third down is unbelievable. And I've been harping on this for weeks now. You got to give the ball to Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson should not get 8 carries. That should not happen. And Robinson, over the past here it is, over the past 4 games, he has had 109 yards combined. He had 23 yards on 8 carries yesterday. You got to feed that guy to the rock, especially if you're not throwing. If you're getting your quarterback sacked all the time, use your running game. Why won't they use the running game? Nuts. I mean, we can just sit here and whine and complain, and I've done that for most of the morning. And I may get back to that a little bit, but it's not even November again, and the season is over. The Ron Rivera era is over. The question is, will he get to coach all 10 games left? I think he will, but if you get more outbursts like what Jonathan Allen did yesterday, dropping all those F-bombs, that may be an indication that, as the old saying goes, the ship be sinking. Thank you, Michael Ray Richardson. Coming up, the unbelievable story of the Charlotte Hornets baseball hat and how it led Mike McDaniel to where he is today, the coach of the Miami Dolphins, who may very well make some noise in the playoffs. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So we got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock today, and I probably told you that I am a big fan of what she writes in the Washington Post. She has become a very good columnist, I think, after covering the Wizards for many years. Candace Buckner, I really like what she does. And you can debate whether this was the column to write after yesterday's god-awful loss, but, it just, if you just pile on, as I've been doing all morning, maybe it's like beating a dead horse. So she went the way of accentuating the positive. Now, this was such a hard game to watch yesterday that I put out this tweet. I said, if all games in the NFL were similar to this one, soccer would have become the most popular sport in the United States. This was a really ugly game to watch, which featured 18 punts. 18 punts. Giants had 8 of them. Tress Way had 10 for a 51.3 average. He was very good in tough conditions. When the wind is blowing like that, man, it's tough to control where the football is going to go, which is why, and we've talked about this in the past, that 17-0 game that the Redskins lost in the NFC Championship game in January of 1987, the year before they won the Super Bowl. It was Sean Landeta who played as big a role as anybody in winning that game for the Giants. He just kept pinning the Redskins back. They had bad field position all day, and they got shut out 17-0 in this game. A great day by Tress Way wasn't good enough for the Commanders yesterday, scoring only 7 points, but 10 punts for an average of 51.3 yards. And we've had seasons, Tress Way's been here a long time, we've had seasons where you would clearly make the case that Tress Way is the MVP of the team. He's been an All-Pro. He's been a Pro Bowler. He's very good to deal with in the locker room. I mean, he's a stand-up guy who's made a career for a really bad team, doing his job really, really well. And so when she was talking to him about how well he had played yesterday, he wanted to deflect that. He says, I think I've only had 2 tackles in my career, and I've never snapped the ball to myself, so I had great players all around me. And she writes, if only those great players could put it together week after week instead of sputtering with inconsistency, then maybe Washington could give its MVP a break. Yeah, that's really where they are, that if you're pointing to the player, not that they didn't put pressure on the quarterback, and Chase Young had a couple of sacks, and they recovered a muff punt, they forced a fumble from Saquon Barkley, all those things. But, the MVP of the team is a punter, which kind of tells you all you need to know. So, in life, this often works out this way, that it's not what you know, but it's who you know. And chance meetings, certain people who see something in you, right place, right time, they all factor in where you go in life. So here's Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel's a kid, grows up in Aurora, Colorado. He's not very big. He's a latchkey kid. His mother works all day. And in Aurora every year, the Broncos hold training camp. And here's young Mike McDaniel. His mom's not home. I guess she doesn't have enough money to send him to camp or whatever. So every day he decides he's going to hang out at the Broncos camp and ask for autographs. He rides his bike there, and should have been wearing a helmet, but I guess in those days wasn't stressed as much. He's 40 years old now. So he shows up at the Broncos camp getting autographs, and he shows up for both sessions. Those days they did 2-a-days, morning and afternoon. So he goes to the morning session, and he's wearing his Charlotte Hornets baseball hat. And he gets an autograph, and he decides he wants the same player in the afternoon, and thinking that the player might recognize the Hornets cap, he's not wearing it, and then he loses it, and that leads us to this story. So here's Mike McDaniel, who's now the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. They lost last night to Philadelphia, but they're very much in the playoff mix, and they've been scoring tons and tons of points. They've been really one of the big stories of the year. Here's how he got to where he is before the age of 40, based on or with the help of a Charlotte Hornets baseball hat. Here he is featured in an NFL Films piece that was done last week, explaining how all of this unfolded, starting with his childhood in Aurora, Colorado, where the Broncos trained.
I would leave the house at 7 a.m. I would ride over to training camp, go get autographs in the morning, watch practice, and I got Robert Del Pino in the morning. Well, later in the afternoon, I saw him again, and I had seen players shun people for getting multiple autographs, so I knew I was wearing a Charlotte Hornets fitted hat that was very loud.
Yeah.
I'm way ahead of the game. He knows that he's giving a Charlotte Hornets hat kid an autograph. He doesn't know a non-Charlotte Hornets hat kid. So took the hat off, got the autograph, and then...
Because what's better than one, Robert?
Two.
Two.
See? It's simple math that I knew as a 9-year-old. Ran back, hat wasn't there. Complete panic. Start to cry, and a Broncos staff member came out, and I asked him, hey, can you look in the lost and found? See, it's a Charlotte Hornets hat. He goes in for about 5 minutes, comes back out. Sorry. 2 days later, same guy grabs me, and he gives me a hat, and the hat has a price tag on it. So the guy went out and bought me a hat.
Sweet.
I introduced that guy to my mom, and they ended up getting married. And we moved to Denver.
There, McDaniel got work as a ball boy for his favorite team during their back-to-back Super Bowl run in 1997 and 98.
Because I was a fan before being a ball boy, it was very easy for me to outwork all the other coaches' kids because it meant the world to me. I was spotting the ball as a ball boy, like sprinting, really putting in some sweat equity. I was the best towel folder.
What's the technique?
I mean, I've lost that art. I was trained in hot towel folding at that point. That's beyond me now. I've lost that skill.
McDaniel went from hot towel folder to walk-on wide receiver at Yale. Football helped him transition from high school to higher learning.
I found my way, one of which was having identity as a football player. That was actually respected on the team, and it was immense for me.
Undersized by even Ivy League standards, McDaniel rarely saw the field, but he discovered his true passion.
Junior year, when I'm not playing that much, most people would quit, but I ended up redirecting that emotion towards coaching players on the team.
Let's go, goes on 2. 1, 2, go!
With a degree in history, McDaniel pondered his career path after graduation.
I was looking into like investment banking and stuff like that, and knew I needed to follow my passion to be good at something. So I went back to my 5-year-old dream, and Mike Shanahan offers me a coaching internship over the summer. I'm working with receivers, and then Jerry Rice was in his last training camp and comes and plays for the Broncos. So I was technically coaching Jerry Rice.
And again, this all stems from one Charlotte Hornets fitted baseball hat.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry Johnson and the boys.
How about that? So let's recap that. That's Carissa Thompson, by the way, conducting the interview with Mike McDaniel as part of this piece on NFL Films. He's a kid, Aurora, Colorado, latchkey kid. Doesn't have anything to do during the day in training camp. Rides his bike over there, asks for autographs wearing a Charlotte Hornets hat, goes back in the afternoon, takes the hat off to ask for more autographs so they don't recognize him from the morning session when he was asking for autographs. The hat gets lost. He's upset. They look in the lost and found for the hat. Somebody from the Broncos organization, he didn't identify him as a coach, but somebody who was working for the team, saw what happened, felt sorry for the kid, and bought him a new hat. He's so thankful for the hat, he introduces this person from the Broncos to his single mom. He marries the mom. Okay? If the hat doesn't get lost, I don't think there's any connection. He's just another kid out there asking for autographs at the Broncos practice. But that leads a Broncos employee to marry the mom. And now he's got an inside with the organization. He becomes a ball boy, learns how to fold towels. He's a very enthusiastic ball boy. One thing leads to another, and I'm sure he got some help from football people in the organization. He gets himself in a walk-on position at Yale, smart enough to get into Yale. They weren't going to let him in unless he could, do the work academically. But he gets in there, probably with some help from football, because, as we saw with that big scandal that happened, 5 or 6 years ago, where people were paying to get people into school as athletes, and let's say you get a Harvard education or Stanford or whatever. So anyway, he gets there. He's not a good player, but he's on the team. Gets interested in coaching, and because of his Broncos connection, winds up as an intern in 2005 when he's 22 years old with, some experience at the Yale level, at an Ivy League level, but not a lot of coaching, not a lot of high playing experience or real coaching experience. But as a coaching intern, he gets there. Then Kyle Shanahan goes to the Houston Texans as an assistant coach, offensive coordinator. He takes McDaniel with him. He's there from 2006 to 2008. And here's another part of the story. You'll have to watch the piece. It's about 11 minutes, but it's pretty good. While he's an assistant in Houston, now he's still a young guy. What is he, like 25, 26 years old? He's got a drinking problem. He's single, and he's living in Houston, making, I guess, halfway decent money as an intern, probably living on, somebody's couch or something. And he had a bad drinking problem to the point where they fired him. Even though he had this great connection with the organization, going back to when he was a kid, asking for autographs and connection, obviously, to Kyle Shanahan, he had to get rid of him. He winds up, and this is one of these great, redemption stories. He winds up coaching with the California Redwoods and the Sacramento Mountain Lions. I guess that was UFL 2009 to 2010. And so when Kyle Shanahan is here in Washington under his dad, they got here in 2010, they figure that Mike McDaniel has revived himself well enough. He's off the booze, and he winds up here as a running backs coach, 2011 to 2012. And he was even the wide receivers coach in the Shanahans last year, 2013, when they went 3-13. Kyle goes to Cleveland after getting fired here with his dad. He takes Mike McDaniel with him, lasts only a year in Cleveland before getting the offensive coordinator's job in Atlanta, takes Mike McDaniel with him there. Atlanta winds up losing that Super Bowl, but Kyle gets the head coaching job in San Francisco, takes Mike McDaniel there, and he's there until 2021, and then last year becomes head coach of the Dolphins. All of that because of a Charlotte Hornets baseball hat. It's just, I'm sure there's more to the story. I'm sure there are things that they saw in McDaniel that was maybe this person who bought him a new Charlotte Hornets hat after the one that was lost saw something in this kid that others didn't see. But the happenstance of all that is really remarkable. It's a remarkable story. And he's got, I don't know if you're tired of the act. Some people are. But he's got this kind of wry sense of humor, and he doesn't seem to take himself very seriously. He obviously takes his work very seriously and now has work to do after his team got housed last night by Philadelphia. But, just all the things along the way that made that happen. There are plenty of stories, and everybody probably has one about, how they were at this crossroads and this person happened to know somebody who knew somebody and referred them, and that's how they got their career launched. And anything you do, any job that you have, even if you take a conventional route through life. But, it happened for me. I met a person at American University who was from Texas, and one thing led to another. And a year and a half after I graduated high school, I found myself in Port Arthur, Texas. What were the chances of that for a suburban kid from D.C.? I mean, it doesn't happen. And that started my path to where I am today, and it's taken me through some pretty cool places along the way. And that happened only because I went to a school in Washington, D.C., of all places, and met somebody from Texas who, through friendship and mentorship, led me to an unusual place that I never even knew existed, never thought of it, never imagined that I would live there, and it started my path to a long career in radio. Pretty cool. All right, coming up, it was 30 years ago today that Joe Carter hit the walk-off home run for the Toronto Blue Jays. We'll look back on that and talk about other plays like that in baseball that are remembered. But this one certainly stands out among the greatest of all time, with Joe Carter walking it off against the Wild Thing, Mitch Williams. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Tony's coming up at 11 o'clock, and before we get to what Joe Carter did 30 years ago today for the Toronto Blue Jays, a couple of movie things. Saw this over the weekend. This is really cool. I'm looking forward to reading this. 1980 was quite a year for comedy movies. Two stand out in particular. One is Caddyshack, where you have various lines that have entered the culture since then. And the bigger one was Airplane. Don't Call Me Shirley, You Can't Be Serious, all those things. It was a movie that was put together by three lifelong friends, Jerry Zucker, Jim Abrams, and David Zucker. And it was their first major studio movie. They did it kind of like, hey, this would be fun to do, let's see what happens. The American Film Institute's ranking of the funniest American films of the 20th century has it 10th behind The Graduate, just ahead of The Producers, and the Library of Congress inducted it into the National Film Registry along with Birth of a Nation and Citizen Kane. Those are two of the most significant movies of all time. Airplane was funny. It was a lot of gags. And they put together, some sequels to it. Airplane 2, I watched that. That was, like, the first half was good, and then they kind of ran out of gags on that. But Airplane 1 stands up as the test of time, and it led to the Naked Gun series and, a few other movies along the way. But now there's a book out called Surely You Can't Be Serious, and the three of them, the three friends, Jerry Zucker, David Zucker, and Jim Abrams, they write about making the movie. And it's the movie was based as kind of a goof on a 1957 disaster film called 0 Hour. And they were just, kind of sitting around, kicking around ideas, and they came up with this. I mean, who'd have thought to get Leslie Nielsen out of retirement to do? He had done a lot of these type of movies, and now you're asking Leslie Nielsen to spoof himself, which launched a whole second career where he, made the Naked Gun movies and made the two airplanes and things like that. They asked them about the writing process. He says, when we were writing, we had what we called our materials, which were 0 Hour and other disaster films from that era. We sat around and watched those movies together, and someone would say, I have an idea. What do you think about this? That was all we were thinking about at the time. Every joke, some would have a germ of an idea, another would add it to them, and then we would say, no, we shouldn't do this, but it was always a build. So the three of them is kind of like, the old Dick Van Dyke Show, where they sat around making jokes and making movies. The idea of casting Leslie Nielsen as a comedian, it was in our contract that they could fire us after 2 weeks, but we were told that during the first dailies of the film, where Leslie delivers that line, I'm serious and don't call me Shirley, everybody just cracked up. After that, we had the extra screening room because everybody on the Paramount lot wanted to come see the dailies. So that was sort of like the breakthrough on that. And, other lines that have emerged from it, like, have you ever seen a grown man naked? Would they be able to do that today? I don't know. And, they asked him about, did you really get Peter Graves to say that line, to get that? And yeah, we managed to pull it off, all those kind of things. So the book is Surely You Can't Be Serious, and it's the oral history of making the movie Airplane, which I think stands up as one of the great comedy movies of all time. Well, it is, because it's in the Library of Congress and all that. Also on the book front, if you read books like I do, there's another book called Opposable Thumbs, and it's about Siskel and Ebert. And they were the go-to guys. I guess if you're under 35, you may not remember them because they've been, pretty much out of the limelight for over 20 years. And Ebert died very young, as did Siskel. Siskel, I think, was like 50-something, and Ebert had terrible cancer, which claimed his jaw. He couldn't even speak. But in their day, back in the 80s, their show ran all the time. It was in syndication. It was started in Chicago. They were film critics from rival newspapers, the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times. Ebert was Sun-Times, Siskel Tribune. And they really didn't like each other at the beginning. But their arguments, and in many ways, this was the beginning of like Mike and the Mad Dog and later PTI and other shows, Embrace Debate. These guys were passionate about film critique, and they clashed and they butted heads, and it made for great television. And so there's a new book by Matt Singer, who's a little bit carried away with them. In this review by Louis Bayard in the Post, he writes, and the book is called Opposable Thumbs, because that's how they would review movies, thumbs up or thumbs down. Siskel might give it a thumbs down. Ebert might give it a thumbs up. Sometimes they would agree, but that's what made the show. Anyway, that's what leads to the name of the book, Opposable Thumbs. And the review from Louis Bayard writes, Opposable Thumb leaves us with the open question of their legacy. Singer, the one who wrote the book, Matt Singer, is an unapologetic fan, declares that they changed movies forever and were inarguably, I think they make an argument for this, but anyway, he says they are inarguably the two most powerful film critics in the world. I think it would depend on how you define power, writes Louis Bayard. He says it's a matter of going on the Tonight Show and seeing your two thumbs-up verdicts plastered in newspaper ads across the country, or is it about changing the conversation? In terms of sheer numbers, Pauline Kael had a far greater pulpit, but more than 2 decades after her death, I would wager more people are reading and arguing than diving into the YouTube look for sneak preview clips. So, you can argue their impact on society and what they meant to the film industry. But in their day, if you said, thumbs up or thumbs down, everybody knew you were talking about a review from their show, from Siskel and Ebert. And they were spoofed all the time. They did like Muppet things. You would see stuff on Saturday Night Live. And in the culture, they were very, very important people for about 10 to 15 years. So that's another book that you might be interested in. Not that I do book reviews here. I just look at others, what other people are writing and how they review them. And those be a couple of books I might be interested in reading. All right. It was 30 years ago today. This is Game 6 of the 1993 World Series. You've got the defending champion Toronto Blue Jays. They had won in 1992 when I believe they beat the Minnesota Twins, who were defending champions. Oh, no. They must have knocked out the Twins in the ALCS. So they'd won the World Series the year before, and now they're trying to repeat. And it comes to Game 6 at Sky Dome in Toronto. Now, it's the bottom of the 9th inning, and the Blue Jays are behind in this game. You've got Mitch the Animal Williams on the mound for the Phillies, the Wild Thing, as they called him, and he was pretty much the basis for the character in the movie Major League that Charlie Sheen played. He was that kind of guy. Wild hair, did wild stuff on the mound, but he had a great year. He had 43 saves, a 3.34 ERA. And the Phillies were kind of they called themselves, what they call themselves? John Kruk called the team the 24 Morons and 1 Mormon, referring to Dale Murphy. The rest of them were shaggy and dirty. They had guys like Darren Dalton and John Kruk and Lenny Dykstra. Kurt Schilling was on that team. They had an image about them, but they were a tough team, and I think most people with Mitch Williams on the mound expected him to close out the game, and that would set up a Game 7. But, in fact, that's not how it ended. So here is Joe Carter at the plate. You got Mitch Williams on the mound for the Phillies. The Blue Jays are behind, and the great late Tom Cheek is at the microphone for the Blue Jays.
2 balls and 2 strikes on it. Here's the pitch on the way. A swing and a belt. Left field. Way back. Blue Jays win it. The Blue Jays are World Series champions as Joe Carter hits a 3-run home run in the 9th inning, and the Blue Jays have repeated as World Series champions. Touch 'em all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life.
And that is what is remembered from that great Tom Cheek call. Touch 'em all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life, which is true. I mean, you never could match that. And it was only the second time in Major League history that a World Series ended on a walk-off home run. The first, of course, Game 7 of the 1960 World Series, where Bill Mazeroski hit a homer off Ralph Terry to win that game 10-9. There is a Chuck Thompson call of that, and it's well known, but he misidentified the pitcher who was on the mound. It was not Ralph Terry. I forget the name of the pitcher at the time. But that is an incorrect call, basically. Also, I think that the one that most people think of when they think of walk-off home runs, it's the Giants win the pennant. It's the Giants win the pennant. Bobby Thompson with a home run off Ralph Branca, and that was the great Russ Hodges call. And sometimes the home run itself is enhanced by the call, and I think that was the case there because, while the Giants won the pennant and they finally got past the Brooklyn Dodgers, who they could never seem to beat, they lost the World Series. I think they were swept by the Yankees in 51. And so, that sort of took some of the starch out of it. This is the last swing of the bat of the 1993 season, and the last swing of the bat gives the Blue Jays their second straight championship, and Joe Carter is remembered for all time on what he did on October 23rd, 1993 at Skydome. Let me finish with this. This is another bizarre story. Comes out of the New York Post, of course, and there's a new book out. John Stamos, who played Uncle Jesse on the show Full House. My daughter loved this show when she was little. You had the twins. It was twin girls. The Ash, whatever their names are. The two blonde twins played only one character because you only have so many shooting hours with young kids. But Uncle Jesse lived in the house, and in the 1980s he was dating a model named Terry Copley. He came home one night to discover that Tony Danza was in bed with this girlfriend and model, Terry Copley. Now, Tony Danza also had a squeaky clean image because he was on a show called Who's the Boss? And so between these two shows, I mean, this was sitcom television in the 80s. And here's this thing that we never found out about it until now. Stamos coming home. He sees the car in the driveway, knows who it is. And, he's just totally distraught by this. And he said he had a hard time, with this. He says, I tried to hold back tears. Time slows and I'm frozen. I can't breathe. A few tears roll down my face. It pisses me off. Then he snaps out of the daze. I feel angry and confused. I could explode. And it blew over. But to think that two of the squeaky clean guys of that era were involved in something like this, I guess that was Hollywood at the time. But as I remember watching these shows with my kids and thinking, how scrubbed clean the images of these two handsome devils were, and then years later we find out that it got pretty ugly behind the scenes. The New York Post reached out to Danza, who's now 72. And also to the model Copley for comment, and neither one would comment on that. Also, Stamos in the book says he hated his ex-wife Rebecca Rahman after their nasty divorce in 2005. He said, my first marriage was shattering to me. I was shattered for way too long. I mean, a year, okay, good, but it went on for years and years and years. So there were tears behind the scenes of the cheers of the time of those two series back in the 1980s. Anyway, that's a wrap for me. I'm sure we'll have plenty of follow-up throughout the week on what happened with the Commanders yesterday. Ron Rivera is scheduled to hold his news conference today. I'll play some of that for you tomorrow, and more follow-up on just an ugly, ugly game yesterday in New York. Tony may have some thoughts on that and other things as he is up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.